This one's getting a little bit personal. I feel bad for whoever wrote this because it's a challenge. So we're a second-generation contractor, so meaning a son or daughter is involved in running the business currently. How do they communicate the retirement plan, the succession plan, in such a way that avoids alienating either family or the rest of the team? That part's relatively easy, particularly now when the family members who are succeeding me are vastly less experienced than the current leaders. Ouch. So it's basically, I think, and we've seen this before, so I mean, this isn't something that's unusual, but basically you have an experienced management team, but you are giving over ownership and likely title to a family member who is less experienced than the rest of the organization, the rest of the existing management team. So I know I've run into that multiple times. It's sticky. What have you seen? Let's try and answer this the best we can.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I know we've worked with contractors. I'm working with one right now where most of this is true. And I tell you that the easiest way that I've seen, and it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, it's just, to me, it gets to the answer. And there's a lot of ways. This is my easiest way, is I get back to, do you have not just role clarity, right? Because there has to be very specific roles. And I realize in this particular case, people are seeing that others are being moved into a role that maybe they're feeling they aren't qualified for. But one is, if you have role clarity, now at least if people are going to have that beef, they may very well have a legitimate beef. That's totally fine. But there has to be communication, and not just in a review process, right? It's got to be in a way that is happening all the time. It has to be in a coaching type of environment. People need to know where they stand. They need to be able to ask the question, and leadership needs to be, and certainly the original owner, right, that now they're a second-generation contractor, it needs to be, in my opinion, painfully clear that this is a family-run company, and succession will happen this way. These types of positions will be held by family members. This is the rest of the organization and how people can move up and what that means for them in title and in compensation and in all those other things. But without true, very open and transparent communication, does nothing but cause problems like this. I look at it as even in family situations that don't involve business, right? You go to, talking retirement, you go to estate planning, and you have people that write their will, and they write their will and they disallow one child and they give one more money than another with no explanation. All that does is lets that parent off the hook from having the conversation, the very difficult conversation as to why this is happening. And they leave it to the children to have to figure out, which just leaves infighting and a lot of mistrust and a lot of anxiety and anger that they may never get over. I look at it the same way here. When you're talking a second-generation contractor, it is up to the CEO and president of that company to be clear, to explain exactly what's going to be happening, and to explain it over and over again in such clear detail that it cannot be misunderstood. It is their responsibility to the ongoing success of the company and to the handing off of this generation, the second generation, to the next generation, right? That this company is going to be viable for multiple generations. By not telling people that, hey, we are going to train these people up into these positions, by not being clear about that, all you're doing is pushing off the inevitable that you will lose other good people. People stay at family-owned construction companies all the time because they love the way it feels. The only way they can love the way it feels is if family continues to treat each other respectfully and continue to be open and honest with all of their, their business family members. So I see it as having the tough conversation now, because otherwise, again, getting back to the whole personal side of life, you don't get those things talked about. All you've done is moved that anger, moved those questions into the next generation to answer, and that just starts to put a rift in things that may or may not ever be able to be recovered from. So I see it as open, honest, conversation early, take it head on, and just explain it. Because people will make it up. They will fill in the blanks if you don't tell them. So just be open and honest and get it right out on the table. How does that really work for the contractors you're working with, David?
Yeah, we've seen a variety of these, and I think as I saw this question, I separate less experience. I separate that into two categories. So one of them is a skill issue, right? So somebody might just be the only successor that's a family member just simply might be young. We see that situation going on at a client, and the daughter was just young, and she's probably going to be ready to take over the reins here shortly. But what was done was that there was just an interim president that was appointed, and he was an interim president for, I want to say, 6-7 years. But his mission profile was to get her ready to go lead. And that was totally there. And like you said, Sue, that's, people do that all day long in family-owned businesses and everything. And that's closing the skill gap and everything like that. So both, it was great for all parties. Now, the other category that I plug in is a behavioral problem. And that one is really, really difficult to go fix. And that dynamic also comes up a lot. If you don't have that behavior under control, so you can deal with somebody that's less experienced and just explain that, I got this company because it's just a family business and, whatever. But if you have behavioral problems, if you're not out there, if you're not positive, the incoming, family member is not positive, they're a disruptor, their work ethic is bad, things like that, things are actually against the values of the company. Inevitably, that will lead to turnover. No matter how you look at it, that will lead to turnover because that just gets to a point nobody wants to go work in that environment. So that's something that will be the beginning of the end in that situation, which is why, frankly, the third generation usually does not. Most construction contractors don't make it past the third generation. So I'd say that this is actually kind of an inflection point. Now, as far as that helping hand that you talked about, there are. And I'm just going to use us as a comparison. I mean, we're an executive advisory firm, so everybody in our team came from executive roles. We're going to look at the business from that standpoint, and to the level of psychology, even though Sue's got a master's in psychology, to the level of psychology that we start to look at the business is really through the lens of an executive in a construction company. We don't get into that really, really, really deep stuff. If there's deep-seated childhood issues, behavioral issues, whatever that. We don't do that any more than a normal executive would. But there are firms that specialize in that. They call them industrial psychologists, and that's what they specialize in. And there's ones that even specialize in family business. We brought them in on some different occasions, and they can do an excellent job of working through these things. And a lot of times, what we've seen is that those behavioral issues that may be manifesting and may seem very, very negative, they actually do much better when they're separated from the business. So, there's taking care of the wealth that was created in the family, and then there's taking care of the business that's kind of the golden goose that's going to go continue to lay eggs. Those are two different things. And so we've seen times where it seemed like it wasn't going to work, and actually just kind of a separation of certain family members out of the business ended up working magically for all parties, both at a personal relationship level, a personal joy level, and at the business level. So this is a very thorny problem, but one that gets navigated all the time. And this is where you're going to want to reach out. And most likely, I think Albert Einstein had a quote that said something about we cannot solve the problems. The problems that we're experiencing today were created by a certain level of thinking you can't go through there and keep thinking the same way and solve those problems. So this does really go down to find that helping hand, whoever that is. Find another business that's gone through this. Find another example of it that's done it successfully. And don't stop reaching out for people. It's kind of like looking for a contractor or something like that on a project. Don't reach out to one or two. Reach out to a half dozen and talk to them and figure out who resonates. Understand that there may be challenges, but this is the biggest problem that you have to solve. So that's how I'd wrap that one up. Do you anything else to add to that one?
Nope, I think you got it all.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end. Excellent questions from the audience. So thank you very much. And if you have questions after the fact, something comes up, just submit them. If you go to our website, there's a contact form on there. They'll just ensure that it kind of gets into the queue and everything. And we'll get back to you and answer the question, or we can have a conversation. So there's no harm in reaching out and just talking to a variety of different people with your challenges. So thank you very much, and hopefully you've